Hello everyone. Today, let's explore an interesting observation regarding global geography and economics. Have you ever noticed that almost all developed nations are concentrated in temperate and cold regions? According to the 2023 IMF report, highly developed economies are almost exclusively located in these climate zones. In contrast, the tropical regions have very few developed nations, with Singapore being one of the rare exceptions. This disparity is actually a well-known topic of discussion in international development and geography. Of course, economic wealth isn't everything, and happiness doesn't solely depend on GDP. Tropical regions have their own blessings, like cheap and delicious bananas and mangoes. However, purely from a geographical and scientific standpoint, it is fascinating to understand the underlying reasons. Why did economic development take such a different path in the tropics? It is a complex question with many intersecting factors, but today we will focus specifically on the geographical aspect. So, let's dive into why tropical economies face unique developmental challenges. Before we get into the main topic, let's first clarify what we mean by economically developed. It isn't just about having skyscrapers. Economically developed means a high amount of value added per capita. To put it simply, value added is the economic value a person creates. For example, if you bake a cake with $2 worth of ingredients and sell it for $5, your profit of $3 is the value added. If you produce and sell 10,000 cakes in a year, you have generated $30,000 in value added. This is what we commonly refer to as GDP per capita, the total value added produced per person. Therefore, a developed country is one where citizens generate a high amount of value added. Conversely, developing countries are those where the value added per person is relatively low. So, why does this earning capacity differ so drastically between countries? The simple answer lies in whether a nation possesses highly profitable industries. And what are these highly profitable industries? Historically, they are the heavy and chemical industries. This sector includes metal industries processing steel and copper, and machinery industries manufacturing cars and electronics. It also covers chemical industries producing plastics, pharmaceuticals, and refined petroleum. These industries utilize massive machinery, allowing a small number of workers to mass-produce goods. This mechanical efficiency translates into extremely high value added per worker. Nations recognized as developed today built their wealth, starting in the 19th century through these very industries. Japan, for instance, experienced rapid economic growth, primarily driven by automotive and machinery manufacturing. Consequently, countries with lower economic development are those that have not fully established heavy and chemical industries. This leads us to our core question: why are heavy and chemical industries so scarce in tropical regions? Several theories attempt to explain this. One theory suggests that heavy industries require high technical skills. However, tropical diseases like malaria and dengue historically shorten lifespans, which may have reduced the incentive to invest in long-term education. Other older, more controversial theories claim that the hot climate made people less inclined to work long hours. Another practical theory points out that extreme heat and humidity are detrimental to delicate manufacturing machinery. While these factors may play a role, let us focus on a fundamental economic characteristic of heavy industry. Heavy and chemical industries are classic examples of capital-intensive industries. To refine steel, manufacture automobiles, or process petroleum, you need massive automated factories. This setup requires astronomical upfront investments, often running into billions or even trillions of dollars. Under capitalism, you must have substantial capital before you can start producing wealth. Therefore, the primary reason the tropics lack heavy industries might simply be that they could not accumulate enough capital. But what determines whether a society can successfully accumulate investment capital? An intriguing clue to this puzzle can be found in the historical economic divide within Europe. If we look at a map of European wealth, we notice a clear north-south divide. The south is relatively less affluent, while the north is highly prosperous. This wealth distribution closely mirrors a religious division. The South is predominantly Catholic, while the North is largely Protestant. This correlation is not coincidental. It stems from differing religious attitudes toward the accumulation of wealth. Historically, Catholicism viewed the hoarding of personal wealth with suspicion, often considering it spiritually dangerous. The famous biblical metaphor of a camel passing through the eye of a needle was often used to discourage personal enrichment. Consequently, believers were encouraged to donate their surplus wealth to the church. In contrast, Protestantism, especially Calvinism, reinterpreted hard work as a form of neighborly love and a divine calling. Under this view, saving the money earned from honest labor was considered entirely moral and even virtuous. These differing beliefs led to vastly different economic outcomes for both regions. In Catholic nations, massive amounts of capital flowed to religious authorities, who spent it on grand cathedrals. While beautiful, these cathedrals did not manufacture goods or generate ongoing industrial wealth. In Protestant nations, citizens kept their savings in banks, creating enormous pools of financial capital. These banks then loaned the accumulated capital to promising businesses, fueling industrialization and rapid economic growth. Standard history textbooks explain that Protestantism spread in the North because Martin Luther translated the Bible into German. While linguistic compatibility helped it resonate with Germanic peoples, there is an even deeper geographical driver at play. Let's look at the climate. Southern Europe enjoys a Mediterranean climate with hot, dry summers. In such warm temperatures, fresh food spoils extremely quickly. Historically, attempting to hoard agricultural surplus in a hot climate was futile because it would simply rot. Over generations, this practical reality fostered a cultural belief that hoarding resources was foolish and socially harmful. This environment made the Catholic doctrine of donating surplus rather than hoarding it feel very natural. Northern Europe, however, is much colder, with average summer temperatures often remaining below 17 degrees Celsius. Using underground cellars, Northerners could easily keep their food stored at temperatures below 10 degrees Celsius year-round. Furthermore, northern winters are long, dark, and freezing, making food storage a literal matter of survival. In this environment, saving and planning ahead was highly rational and celebrated as a core virtue. This seasonal necessity laid the cultural groundwork for Protestantism's praise of thrift and financial saving. Thus, local climates shaped survival strategies, which influenced religious values and ultimately determined how capital was formed. Now, let us apply this geographical logic to the tropical regions. The tropics are characterized by intense, year-round heat and high humidity, with average temperatures often exceeding 25 degrees Celsius. In this hyper-warm environment, food spoils and molds almost instantly, far faster than in southern Europe. Additionally, because the tropical climate allows for continuous harvests throughout the year, there are no harsh winters. With no non-productive season to prepare for, there was historically no survival incentive to store food long-term. Anthropological studies on hunter-gatherer societies confirm this correlation between latitude and storage habits. Societies living below 30 degrees latitude show almost zero cultural history of long-term food preservation. This behavior is not a character flaw. It is a highly rational response to an environment where hoarding leads only to rot and pests. However, this lack of a deep-seated cultural habit of saving made transitioning to modern financial capital accumulation very difficult. Without domestic financial savings, tropical nations struggled to build the massive capital required for heavy industries. There is another critical factor in capital accumulation: agricultural productivity. Before any nation can industrialize, the vast majority of its population must work in agriculture. If agricultural productivity is high, farmers can produce a surplus, sell it for profit, and deposit those savings into banks. This concept is a well-established principle in development economics. Industrial capital begins with agricultural surplus. At first glance, you might assume tropical regions would have incredibly high agricultural productivity. With abundant sunlight and heavy rainfall, it seems like a plant paradise. However, the reality of tropical soil is quite different. Because of the constant heat and moisture, soil microorganisms are hyperactive. They decompose organic matter like fallen leaves so rapidly that the nutrients are consumed before they can enrich the soil. Furthermore, torrential tropical rains constantly wash away what few soluble nutrients remain in the topsoil. You might wonder how massive rainforests can thrive if the soil is so nutrient poor. Tropical trees have evolved a fascinating survival strategy. Their roots secrete organic acids to dissolve rock minerals directly. This allows them to absorb nutrients directly from the earth, bypassing the barren soil entirely. However, this process leaves the surrounding soil highly acidic and depleted of essential nutrients. Strongly acidic soil is highly detrimental to the growth of almost all standard agricultural crops. This is why traditional tropical farming relies heavily on slash and burn agriculture. Burning vegetation produces alkaline wood ash, which temporarily neutralizes the soil's acidity, so crops can grow. Unfortunately, this method cannot support continuous high-yield farming. Because of these soil limitations, tropical agricultural productivity historically remained very low. Since farmers could barely harvest enough to feed themselves, they could not generate a financial surplus. Without farmer savings, local banks had no capital to fund heavy industrial projects. To summarize our geographical analysis, the lack of developed economies in the tropics stems from a scarcity of high value-added, heavy and chemical industries. These industries require enormous financial capital, which tropical societies struggled to accumulate domestically. Its capital deficit was caused by two main environmental factors. First, the heat discouraged food preservation and long-term saving habits. Second, nutrient-poor, acidic soils limited agricultural productivity, leaving farmers without financial surplus to save. Ultimately, both hurdles trace their roots back to the challenges of a hot and humid tropical environment. While many factors shape a nation's history, the profound influence of climate on economic development is hard to deny. This brings us to an interesting comparison. How did Japan achieve its dramatic economic success? Japan's rise as an industrial powerhouse was built on highly productive wet rice agriculture, which yielded a reliable surplus. Understanding this, historical leaders gathered these agricultural savings and channeled them into modern businesses. The legendary figure Eiichi Shibusawa, known as the father of Japanese capitalism, established numerous banks to facilitate this flow of capital. Through mergers, the key financial institutions he founded eventually became what is known today as Mizuho Bank. The name Mizuho literally translates to a rich harvest of rice, beautifully symbolizing how agricultural productivity laid the foundation of Japan's modern economy. It seems quite fitting, even if their modern ATMs occasionally experience technical issues. Thank you for watching, and I hope this gives you a new perspective on the intersection of geography and economics. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and check out the videos on screen for more perspectives on history, geography, and economics.